apartment at your house, and you got extra room.
Where's he going to school?
Home, but his girlfriend's at Athens. He came in school at 3:30.
From
Good.
He's got school today.
Don't you remember those days? We lived in love. You remember that? We sat around.
That's what me and Joel were saying.
You remember
We're
that?
that, we're his age. We're doing the same.
Test, test, test.
Hanging out
Test,
there.
test.
If he was away at college, we wouldn't worry about it, 'cause we wouldn't know.
Yeah,
He's
but
coming
you don't know, don't hurry up.
I'll set an alarm just to make sure all the kids are home.
Well, I woke up at 3, he wasn't home.
We're going to just wait about one more minute and wait on another member. If they don't show up, we're just going to move on without them. Move on when ready.
I'm not prepared for that committee.
You know, it's been a long time. You don't know. Did you tell Sean that I had Hawkeyes? Did you not tell him that?
That's going to be solved in another 10 days or so.
Absolutely.
Move on. First of all, just want to welcome everybody here to the very first meeting of this new Transportation Subcommittee on Appropriations. It's great to see everyone here this morning. I'm very excited to chair this very important committee. Look forward to working with each of you. And but before we get too far, since we're a new committee, I think we need to say some blessings over this new committee. So I'm going to ask Mr. Coomer, if he would, to return to say a blessing for us. Prayer.
Gracious Heavenly Father, we thank you for the opportunity to serve you and to serve those in our communities. We send us here to represent them and represent the interests of our state. Pray, Lord, that your blessings will be on us with wisdom and guidance, knowledge, understanding. I pray you bless this meeting and all we set our hands to. In Christ's name, I pray.
Thank you. Like I said, I'm really excited about this committee and what we can do to support our transportation system in Georgia. I've always said that I thought that our transportation sector is one of the brightest, if not the brightest spot in state government at this time. And I think that this appointment of this new committee shows our commitment as a House to supporting all the good things that are going on with the transportation sector. And as we look at other options and study other pieces of the puzzle, I think this just shows our commitment as a House, and I appreciate the leadership for giving us this opportunity to really partner with you guys in a much even bigger way. So, Commissioner, it's always good to see you. We look forward as a committee to working with you. Before we move on as well, since we're new, I'm going to let the committee. We'll just start with Pam on my left side, and let them go down and introduce, because these may be some new faces for you all as well. Pam, you're number 18. Go ahead.
Representative Pam Dickerson, Rockdale County and Newton, House District 113.
James Beverly, Bibb County, House District 143.
Chuck F. Stration from Decula.
Christian Coomer.
All right.
Bill Hitchens, I represent Effingham and Chatham County in the Georgia Ports, House District 161.
Dominique?
Dominic Laricchia, one of, if not the best districts in the state, District 169, Coffee County, Bacon County, and Jeff Davis County.
Don't start anything yet, no. John Carson, Cobb, and Cherokee County.
And I also want to take a moment to thank Tracy Atchison. Tracy's going to be moving on she's been somewhat, I don't want to say stolen, but I've had an opportunity to work with her on the Economic Development Subcommittee, and I was very excited when this change took place, because I knew that Tracy would be my budget analyst, or our budget analyst. But Tracy's moving on to the Department of Ag to help that department with their budget. And so Tracy, we're going to miss you, and we thank you for everything. And Tracy's already got everything in good shape. So Tracy, best of luck to you as you move on, and I know you'll do great things over at Ag. Commissioner, again, thank you for being here today. And I know you've already made this probably the same presentation or almost to the other subcommittees, so we appreciate your patience with us as we go through some changes in the House, but I think you'll find that these changes are going to allow us to even work closer together. So with no further ado, we appreciate you being with us this morning. Go ahead.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the members of the committee. It is great to have a committee that's focused a little more on transportation, and certainly welcome the speaker's comments that he provided last week, and working forward on transportation matters, as they are critical and they are connected directly to keeping this state the #1 place to do business. And Mr. Chair, I do echo your sentiments for Tracy. Tracy, I appreciate all your work and dedication to our department. The team here with me today certainly can't get it done without you and your help. So thank you and congratulations for moving on. Mr. Chair, I just would like to introduce our staff I have with us here today. Starting at the end down there is Josh Waller. All y'all know Josh. We have Jay Roberts, who's texting at the moment and not paying attention. Director of Planning. At least he's not driving. Okay, he's planning. He's planning something. We have Meg Perkle, our chief engineer, Mike Dover, our deputy commissioner, Angela Whitworth, our treasurer, Selena Helms, over the Office of Budget. So glad to have such a great team. What I want to do, since I have presented some of this information, we just changed up all the numbers to see if anybody was paying attention. But we do have a few changes, and I do want to go back over this for the full committee, for the members who have not heard this about the amended fiscal year 17. So what I'm going to do first is touch a little bit again on the federal, sort of the state of the federal, even though it does have a direct correlation to our budget. Go over the amended FY17 budget, and of course finally end with any questions or comments you may have. So with that being said, I'll flip over to the next slide, and just again, a reminder about federal funding. We still are reliant on federal funding to do most of our capital projects. The good news is we moved from about 55% being federal out of our total budget to about 40% being federal. And when you see this slide on slide number 2, you realize the complexity that comes with federal programs. There's 11 budget categories, and then there's 6 subcategories out of those 11, but a total about $1.3 billion to Georgia. So that's important. Those $1.3 billion from the feds are very important so that we can advance our transportation program. What has been a challenge this year is we're working on the second continuing resolution for Congress. So we yet to have a full years of federal appropriations. So now we have a continuing resolution that goes through the end of April of this year, at which time, or before which time, Congress will have to act again to either do another continuing resolution, or our hopes is to do a full years of appropriations. And there's a little nuance to that as well, is that every year the federal transportation bill, each state got a little bit more dollars. So when they do a continuing resolution, as we're in now, we're working on last year's budget. So when they do the full appropriations, we should see a little bit more. To date, we've been given the authority to spend or to invest about $672 million out of the $1.3 billion. So that has a little bit of impact on the pace of which we deliver projects. We have not had to stop anything, but we've got close a few times, just not because of the federal funding being in place. Also on the federal front, the Trump administration, or President-elect Trump, has nominated Elaine Chao as the Secretary of Transportation. She was the Deputy Secretary of Transportation under George H. Bush for a couple of years, and then she was the Director or Secretary of Labor for 8 years under George W. Bush. So she has experience in those roles as secretary positions, and so we look forward to getting her on board, and she will probably make different appointees for the Federal Highway Administration, Federal Rail, et cetera. So we'll watch those as they pan out. Also on the federal front, many of you may have heard that there's at least was a strong emphasis on infrastructure during the campaign. We're watching that. There's been suggested or mentioned a $1 trillion investment over 10 years or so, and we'll see what form that takes. But I'm excited to say that what has been said this far between Speaker Ryan and the Trump-elect has been that there's some form of private finance or some form of tax exempt to bring private sector funds into transportation. And part of our 10-year plan that Jay laid out last year with the governor includes a lot of that private equity in these design build finance projects, these major projects like the express lanes, like what we did at 285 and 400, taking that same methodology. So I'm hoping that and thinking that Georgia will be well positioned if something like that comes forward. Time will tell. The other thing that I keep reading is this is probably not the first 100 days initiative. So it's probably not one of those first things, but something during this year. And finally, on the federal front, this FAST Act, the current transportation bill we are in now, expires in the year 2020. Funding will run short prior to that, so the Trump administration will have to address the federal transportation bill in this first term. So sort of a couple of moving parts there. We'll stay tuned. But hopefully it should be all good news. And as the nation goes, there is a lot of interest in increased investment in the infrastructure. And I think we're well positioned. And we're so well positioned because when we move to the next slide and talk about the amended budget, our total amended fiscal year 17 budget totals $1.936 billion. And that's over the base of where we started at $1.827 billion. And what we've done is taken the governor's recommendation. If you look at on page 202, if you have the governor's rec, what we've done is taken it and sort of put it into bar charts to graphically look at these budget categories. And what I intend to do is go through each of these budget categories and talk in a little greater detail about what they consist of and what the amended budget does. Again, if you look at this bar chart, across the bottom you see some percentages. Under capital projects, you see 46%. That means 46% of the capital budget goes to capital projects. The 60% there is the total budget when you combine state and federal of how much is going to capital projects. So it's sort of good allocation to look at where dollars are allocated by percentages in total across the top. And this bar chart is a little different than what's shown in the governor's rec on 202. This is state motor fuel and state general fund fees component. So let's take a deeper dive in capital projects program on the next slide. Again, the capital projects totals $985 million, 46% share. And capital projects, as we flip on, really consist of three budget programs. The first of which is capital construction. Capital construction consists of what it sounds like, the projects that are widening, bridge replacements, reconstruction, passing lanes, capacity, all those type of projects is what capital construction consists of. And the amended budget is amending $68.5 million in, of which $7 million will go towards quick response contracts back in our districts. Those are those quick projects to build turn lanes or extend turn lanes, runarounds, things like that, which again, that provides the districts a lot of opportunity to do very quick projects, not having to follow a federal process, get out there, get some relief very quickly, and always a very popular program. Capital construction also includes right-of-way and design and all those other activities as well when you look at those numbers. The next under capital projects is capital maintenance, and amending in $17.8 million to a total of $127 million. And so that capital maintenance is those resurfacings, rehabilitations, bridge rehabilitation, all the things that we have to do to keep the state of good repair of our transportation system. But let me go back for a second on capital construction and let you know what the impact of that is when you couple that with the federal. We're on target for this fiscal year and next fiscal year of bidding out about 1.4, almost $1.5 billion of projects. Over 423 projects this year and about 306 next year. To give you a little perspective, back before Transportation Funding Act of 2015, we were somewhere around $800 to $900 million bidding every year out, and now we're at that $1.4 billion level. So you can see a significant investment that's what's hitting the ground right now. The other part of capital construction, though, is design in the right-of-way, basically getting the work done to come out the tailpipe to get it on the ground. So you can see a pretty big ramp up almost immediately in projects. So very excited about that. And one other part of the capital construction budget is local bridge replacements. We've been very innovative in last year and then this year again going out to replace county bridges or city bridges that are load posted and using what we're calling design build bundles. So we take a design build approach and we're taking 3 or 4 or 5 bridges that are geographically in a similar area and bidding those out to be designed and built by design build contractors. And so now we're up to, I believe, about 39 bridges. We did 25 last year and bringing the balance on this year. And we have a great support from our local governments because what we're doing is asking the county commissions or the cities, the school boards, and the EMS or fire rescue, can we close this bridge and not put a detour in and close it for a short period of time and then put a bridge back? And we're doing all these on the local roads, not just the state routes. This is predominantly focused on our county roads and city streets where they are load posted. In fact, there's about 1,600 bridges across the state that are county owned or city owned that have a load restriction on them, which a legal weighted vehicle cannot cross. So very excited that we're focused on that as well, in addition to the state bridges and the things that we're doing on the state program. But just wanted to highlight those few things as it relates to capital construction. Back to capital maintenance now, without if the second there is $17.8 million amended in, and that's really going toward, again, state of good repair. And to give you by way of, again, example, prior to HB 170, we were investing about $80 to $90 million a year in resurfacing projects. Now we're putting about $300 into all state routes and about $100 million into interstates, to about $400 million. That's getting us back to that sort of 10 to 15 year cycle of resurfacing and rehabilitating pavements, where before we were on that 50-year cycle, which was not sustainable. And again, just as an example, from January 2016 through June of next year, we will resurface over 2,500 miles of roadways across the state. That means there's a lot of cones out there and a lot of work going on. So again, to get our system back in a state of good repair. So the last budget category under capital projects is local roads. And this category or budget program is all about advancing some state dollars until we get reimbursed federal dollars for those transportation enhancement project categories. So don't think that this is all that we do for the local roads. This is one nuance of the transportation enhancement program that has been around for a number of years, that in fact is not part of the new federal transportation bill, but we're using those previous federal transportation dollars to complete this program. No change needed in that category. Moving over to the next budget category of general operations, you can find that on page 203. General operations really consist of these next budget program categories, and let's talk about what those are. Construction administration is the first one, at amending in $4.5 million to a total of $101.1 million. Construction admin is all the things that's done to get a project ready to get it out the door, if you will, to be built. That's pre-construction and construction support activities, which is design, right-of-way, environmental services, the bidding part of that, program delivery, managing the projects basically. Also our procurement office, the Office of Construction, Material Testing, and Design Policy. And in fact, the additional amended budget dollars are going to support a bigger state program. As the state program goes, we have to provide those support services. But we're doing it with our existing staff. And so that means that we're outsourcing even more than we ever have. In fact, in outsourcing, about 80% of our design is outsourced efforts now. Right-of-way acquisition is about 50% outsourced. Our construction management that goes on out there once the project gets underway is about 67% outsourced. Our testing, sampling the materials and testing the materials that are put out there is about 55% outsourced. And we're into outsourcing our project management. So we have consultants that actually help manage our projects from start to finish so that we can drive the workload down. Our project managers were getting about 30 to 40 projects on them with this increase, and that's just not manageable to be able to keep laser focus on delivering these projects. So just to show you how we're doing more, so to speak, within the constraints of what we have there now. For instance, let me give you an example. In the procurement part of this, all these investment dollars turns into more work. So in fiscal year 15, for what's architectural and engineering services, hiring consultants to do design or right-of-way or environmental, in fiscal year 15, we did 399 contracts at $177 million. In fiscal year 16, last year after the amended dollars came in, we did 561 contracts at $286 million. And so far this year, up to about end of October, we've already done 404 contracts at $178 million. So we've already exceeded this year what we did total in 15 and are on track to surpass what we did last year, which was a record year. So it's a lot of, and we did that with just a couple of more people in the procurement office. So that was the only office that really saw some headcount increase because we're putting so much procurement out. So really proud of the staff for what they're doing to get this work out and getting it underway. The next budget category is data collections. There's no change. Data collections is an office that does our GIS efforts. They do a lot of reporting, that's federal reporting about everything you can think about, the width of the roadway, how many miles of road, all kind of data that's required for federal reporting. They also do the maps, the county maps and the state maps, which are required by law to be created. So they do a lot of work there, and really a backbone of data. Anytime you get on the website and you can click on a project and you click on a map to get a project, all the GIS information, they support and provide that data, and they consult a lot of it out as well, and also traffic counts and all those kind of things that they do as a consulted effort. But no change in budget there. Department admin is the next budget program. Increased through the amended fiscal year of $1.85 million to a total request of $68.8 million. Department admin is things like HR, legal, Office of Financial Management, IT support, and also our EEO office, which supports small business and DBE programs. And that's one of the things that we're very excited about as well, is the focus we have now on small, veteran-owned, and DBE businesses of trying to promote and provide supportive services to those companies to do business now with these state-funded dollars. So we've created an office here in Atlanta over in Decatur, right off the MARTA stop, right in downtown. That's a sort of a business incubator model where DBEs, veterans, and small businesses can come in and get support and help for them to bid on work, to set up an office, to be able to have a place to come meet, to have computer access, and also to provide support such as in plan reading, business letters, and just a really overall big support effort. The $1.85 million for department admin goes toward that, and for a lot of computer support for software and hardware support, and also a focus on training. We are doubling down our focus on training for safety. When I say training, I mean training for safety. Our men and women of GDOT work in a very dangerous environment, and we're really becoming laser focused on their personal safety and well-being. We've had too many people hit, and of course, a year and a half ago, we had a fatality. So we're really going to be focusing on training. So very, very excited to, again, give our employees the training they need to be safe out there. The next budget program is planning, and planning is no change. That $1.7 million really supports about and leverages about $22 million in federal. So the state budget part leverages the federal, of where Jay and his staff are able to do planning studies, work with the 16 MPOs across the state. In fact, they're going to be starting their STIP development, which is that 4-year financially constrained plan. Be out this spring, meeting across the entire state, having public meetings, meeting with your local delegations of county commissioners and city mayors and councils to talk about what projects are out there, get their input in the projects, talk about priorities. And it's really every time we do a STIP development, which we haven't done in the last few years because there hasn't been a federal bill with any certainty to it, it's always a great exchange to get out and really hear from the county commissioners and the mayors and councils about what's important to them, what's going on in their communities, and to get that input. So there'll be more to come, and most of you will be notified when that happens too, when they're out in your districts. The other things the planning division does is, of course, work on big plans like the freight and logistics plan that we have in place, which is being updated to be in concert with the federal requirements now. We have the managed lane implementation plan, of which the express lane projects were derived from. And also, they're even studying this thing called the downtown connector right out here, trying to look for some solutions right here to how to provide some relief in Midtown Atlanta with over 430,000 cars a day going through it. So think about that, 430,000 cars a day, well, more than one person on average per car. That's more than the people in the entire state of Wyoming travels every day in the downtown connector. So sort of interesting. The next budget program is traffic management. And traffic management consists of our hero operations, our traffic management center, our traffic engineering work that does signals and all the changeable message signs along the freeways. And this budget request is $5 million, and the amended to take it to $31 million. And what we plan to do with that is to continue our deployment of replacing the software in all 9,500 signals across the state for cities and counties, as well as GDOT signals. We're trying to deploy the most recent technology so that you can get real-time information from the signals basically wirelessly, and you can make adjustments. And so this provides a great opportunity, and we're doing that through the entire state. The other part of traffic management we're excited about is something we've been doing here in Metro Atlanta, is where signals cross jurisdictions, or there's long corridors, say such as US 41 or even Peachtree, where there's corridors of signals where we optimize the signals and they all talk to each other, and we actively manage that so that you can get better traffic flows. But also that comes with a lot of maintenance. You have to have every signal functioning properly. So we're going to take what we've learned here in Metro Atlanta and start deploying it to the other metropolitan areas of the state. We're starting in Savannah down on Abercorn and trying to get all those signals so that they interrelate and talk to each other in an efficient manner. And so again, that's really maximizing our existing assets and efficiencies in those traffic signals. So we're excited about doing that as well. So that's part of what comes out of traffic management. As I talked a minute ago about construction admin and how much we outsource, I just wanted to throw this in here to give you an idea of head count. Since 2011, we're down about 700 employees, and what I'm going to suggest to you is we're currently at 3,882. We need to be about 3,900 to 4,000. We need to hover in that area to give us the staff we need to run the critical functions of the department, especially when it comes to emergencies. We've dealt with a hurricane last fall, and now we've had winter weather. If y'all remember, this time last week it was about 13, or this past weekend, it was barely got out of the freezing. We have to be able to respond to that. But I think we sort of right-sized the ship, if you will, and have made a lot of changes strategically to align people in functions and jobs to be as efficient as we can. But we need to stay about where we are. in that 3,900 to maybe 4,000 range. The next budget program category is one that's very popular. It's the Local Maintenance Improvement Grant at $173.9 million, which is an increase for the amended budget year of $8.3 million. If you recall, the LMIC program is a formula pro rata share based on 1/3 population and 2/3 road miles of either cities or counties. And this is a program where each city and county submits their list to show that they have a budget program to either meet or exceed the either 10% match if you're a TIA county or a 30% match if you're not. It's a very successful program. We've seen about a 30% increase in this program since the effects of HB 170. So I have not heard any city or county saying, gee, I don't like this. So I think every one of them have been very popular. What we suggest to do with the $8.3 million in the amended is what we did last year with last year's amended, is to focus on safety for cities and counties by doing a competitive process that's data driven. So we can focus on counties and cities that are having higher fatality rates or crash rates, and then deploy those dollars so that they can put stripes on the roads, replace signs, maybe improve guardrails. And so instead of taking 8.3 and doing that formula, of which when we did that, the lowest was about $24, the city would get about $24, and the average was about $12,000, which when you spread 8.3 over that formula, nobody gets a whole lot to do really much. We rather targeted those numbers or that investment strategically for safety. In fact, this last year we had over 500, I think it's about 530 fatalities that were on local roads out of regrettably over 1,500 fatalities statewide. So we want to take a targeted approach to improve safety on city and county streets, and that was very popular last year as well. The next category is one that doesn't get a lot of hoopla, not many ribbon cuttings, but it's one that's critical, and that's the routine maintenance budget program, amending in $2.7 million. This is on page 204, the governor's rec, for a total of $426.5 million. And most of this, all this additional will go to contract work. And that's one of the things I think has been a real success story of HB 170, is that the men and women at GDOT had a backlog of maintenance work that has to be done, and it's perpetual. It's ongoing. You never can get caught up, right? It's just like your house. You never can get caught up with what you need to do around the house. Well, we never get caught up with what we need to do around Georgia. But so we've now are outsourcing routine maintenance activities, and these work perfectly for small veterans-owned and DBE contractors. In fact, we've done about 100, we've actually got a little over $100 million of these small contracts underway. We had 38, I believe it was 38 new small businesses and DBEs that are bidding on these projects now. We're continuing to grow that from that state supportive services contract. We're still trying to get small business. So I encourage any of you, when you're back in your districts, if you know somebody that can cut trees, that can do parking lot seal coats, that can stripe, that has a backhoe that can replace a pipe, do these small singular activities, here's a great opportunity for small business to grow, because it's not our traditional highway contractors that does this kind of work. They can, but they much rather be doing the big projects. But these are singular activities that are what our men and women of our maintenance crews do. Now, our men and women in maintenance have plenty to do. There's no shortage of work for them. This gives us a tool, again, to outsource these type activities to try to make some headway on the backlog. So, again, a very great success story in routine maintenance. The other thing in routine maintenance budget category I want to share with you, and when I spoke to the previous committee on the appropriations, it was announcement of something called the CHAMP program, which is very similar to the HERO program that you see here in Metro Atlanta. The CHAMP program will be Coordinated Highway Assistance and Maintenance Program, which will be a service patrol running all the interstates outside of Metro Atlanta, with the exception of I-24 and I-59, those two forgotten interstates up in the northwest part of the state. But we're going to have a service patrol making 50-mile loops. That they're out there for two purposes. One is to assist motorists with flat tires or run out of gas or need some help. And secondly is to do maintenance work, such as pull the retreads out of the road, pick up litter, clean pipes, cut tree limbs back so you can see signs and do all those kind of hand things that you can do while they're on patrol. We're rolling this program out now. It will be deployed through the spring of the year, so we'll have an increased presence across the state to provide service to the people traveling in and through Georgia. Very excited about that program, and you'll see those. There will be standardized markings on trucks, standardized uniforms, and we're outsourcing that entire effort. You will be able to reach them via calling 511, just like you do now if you need a hero. Call 511, and through the miracle of cell phones and cell towers, they can pretty much locate you and route you to the right person to get dispatched if you need help. So that will be on 16 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365. So a very nice feature for safety and for maintenance. Our next category is payments for CERTA, State Road and Tollway Authority, $94 million. Really, if you turn over to 205 in your governor's rec, really no change dollar-wise, a little bit of change in fund sources of what those are. I'm going to let Chris Tomlinson, he'll have an opportunity to present in a minute. I'm not going to steal his thunder, talk about that. But just again, as a refresher, sort of the three ways we interact with CERTA, and a great partner they are, because they help us deliver the express lane projects, our design, build, finance projects is 285-400 through an intergovernmental agreement. And so they certainly have operations, especially as we stand up these express lanes. Mr. Chair, as you mentioned, by the end of this month, those on I-75 South will be open and operational. And of course, CERTA has to have some support to get those up and running financially until collections begin. So we'll certainly do that. Obviously, CERTA handles our debt service through the GARVI, or federal debt service obligations, and of course the GRBs as well. And finally, the Georgia Infrastructure Bank, as you can see, a $10 million motor fuel or state general fund to replace motor fuel was sort of that fund source swap. So Georgia Transportation Infrastructure Bank, certainly a popular program, and I'll certainly let Director Thompson talk more in detail about that. Finally, moving into the last budget program, which is intermodal, which comes from state general funds, other than the fee component that comes from aviation, the 1% exemption aviation. $17.9 million was base, a change of $940 as an outcome, and that outcome is a small difference in $1,834 that's moving out of department admin into intermodal. And then we reduced $894 from a merit system assessment, so the net change is $940. But while we're talking about, there's some budget maneuvers there of moving from what was in department admin that needed to be intermodal, and then an adjustment based on some merit system assessments. But again, when we think about intermodal, let me give you a highlight of what $17.9 million does. It leverages about $67 million of federal dollars. And the biggest part of that 17.9 actually is in the aviation program, of which I believe is a little over $13 million that's collected from the 1% sales tax that goes to fund the aviation program. The federal aviation program is a 90% federal, 5% state, 5% local match. That generates about $48.7 million of investment through airport aid. And again, as a reminder, we have 104 airports across this great state. Also, in the intermodal budget is the ports and waterways, obviously blessed with the two great seaports that we have. State general funds are about $942,000 is what that budget is. And of course, that's where we're working with the Ports Authority on the Savannah Harbor expansion project. A lot of activities going on. Most of that supports the mitigation work that we're doing, purchasing right-of-way as part of mitigation, providing sites for the dissolved oxygen injectors that are being built. And so we have a close working relationship with GPA on delivering that. There's a lot of activity going on, as you know. Finally, or not finally, but next is the rail program that comes out of intermodal. State general funds constitute about $486,000. We get about $16,000 federal. And again, this is to support our state-owned rail program and work also to do studies on rail corridors as well with Federal Rail Authority. So that's what that program does. And finally is transit. About $3.2 million of the 17.9 go to support transit, which is about 31 million federal. Again, that's for the rural transit programs, the urban transit programs, and we work as a liaison and administer those federal dollars with local governments. So a lot of work. In fact, 125 counties across the state have a public transportation system. So there's a lot of interaction back and forth, and a lot of those are, ride assist or getting people back and forth to doctors. So Georgia does have a big public transit system when you think about that amount of counties that we have there, and also work with some capital projects. Sort of the capital projects in transit are actually the Greyhound bus terminal here is being renovated or being constructed in Albany, and the transit center down there, and the Savannah ferry boat rehabilitation of the docks down there on the river. So moving out of the budget program, I'll just conclude with a big thank you for the bonds. Bond 128 provided $100 million to target bridges. $100 million gets you about 25 to 26 bridges to be replaced across the state. So you can see what an investment that is. There's a reminder, the average age of a bridge in Georgia is 43 years old. Most all of them were designed to have a 50-year lifespan. So that tells you that we got too many on the other side on the 50 equation. But this commitment to $100 million in bonds last year and in what's proposed this year is a big step in the right direction to take care of Georgia's infrastructure. Obviously, we had two other bonds for Georgia Southwestern, and then we had also bond 130 of $6.1 million to take care of Georgia's short line railroads and keeping those in functioning condition. It's becoming even more important now as we have more inland ports to move freight. It's certainly a great benefit to us to move freight on rail efficiently and get those containers off the road. So any investment in our rail system is certainly a good one. And then finally, in conclusion, this is a conditioning slide. I want you to keep looking at this slide. And when you're out there in traffic and you're mad, this is progress. So just pardon our progress. You know what I look like. You can visualize my head on one of those orange barrels and say your Sunday school lesson over me if you want to. But ladies and gentlemen, I'm telling you, Georgia is headed in the right direction. We're making tremendous progress. We're not where we need to be, but we're on the right journey, I assure you. And at this time, Mr. Chair, I'd be glad to entertain any questions or comments.
All right, thank you, Commissioner. Any questions from the committee for the Commissioner? I don't see any. I've got a couple. Actually, Representative Laricchia, you got a question? Go ahead.
Just one quick comment. You mentioned about the office in Decatur that helps with some of these small businesses that have ideas. And, the Chamber recently mentioned having an office focused on rural economic development down in Tifton. Is there somewhere closer to rural South Georgia than Decatur to maybe help point them to, or a number that they can call? And I'm not being critical. I'm just saying, that these rural parts of the states where a lot of these folks will come from, that are right away and so forth.
Yeah, no, absolutely. We put the office here in Metro, but this is a statewide effort. So now we don't necessarily have physical offices elsewhere. They've certainly been to Albany several times. And we actually have two programs, so it's sort of crazy, but we have a federal program to support DBE, the disadvantaged business enterprises, and we have our state program that does small business, veterans loans, and DBE. We have two separate program managers doing that, but they both have statewide emphasis, and they actually have toured around the state. They are very engaged statewide. They're always in transit to be meeting locally, because you do have to reach out locally to where these companies are. You can't expect them to come to Atlanta. So that's one of their goals and charges. They just sort of headquartered here in Decatur to have a central location. I think that's one thing we continue to watch and grow, because especially as it goes back to those maintenance contracts, which can range anywhere from $10,000 up to $1 million. Especially the big pavement kind of things of repairing concrete and things like that. We need those contractors, and they're throughout the entire Georgia that can do that kind of work. And again, it's a great opportunity to grow Georgia businesses, DBs, veterans, and small business. So we do have to make sure that we're not just focused right here in Metro Atlanta, but it's a statewide effort.
Okay, Representative Dickerson.
I would like to thank you all for all the work that you do, but how well are these small businesses vetted? Because I know that I had some problems, but you guys got right on it with maintenance, on some of the state roads where some of the grass was,
Right.
3 or 4 months, and
Right.
it was really an issue.
Yeah,
And-
so they do go through a review process, and those are things we're always look to improve upon. We're trying to make it easy though, and we're actually on these small businesses, we're actually using the Department of Administrative Services website to get them registered and pre-approved, but there is a statement of qualifications that has to be reviewed to ensure that they have adequate experience and can demonstrate that to move forward so that they can bid. And that's what we do. And through this Department Administrative website is that what's neat about this is they get a bid. Anytime a district says, I have a need to fill a crack on a road, they are able to send out an email blast, and everybody that says I can fill cracks on the road gets an email blast, and they send their bid in electronically. And we've already contracted with them, so they're already under contract. It's like on-call or on-demand services contracts. So we're trying to make it very fast and efficient. Obviously, one, to get them pre-qualified so that they can bid, and then once they get to the opportunity to bid, we want them to bid, get the work done, and pay them very quickly so we can do it again.
Mr. Chairman, can I have a follow-up
Sure.
on that? Thank you. I understand what you're saying. So when you are vetting these companies, are you making sure that they have the proper equipment? Because that's important too when they go out on these jobs.
Right.
Because, I think that was the problem with the road maintenance.
Mm-hmm.
Because they didn't have the equipment to cover all of
Right.
the area in which,
In your case, there was a demonstrated example where they represented, they had the equipment, the ability to get the equipment. They did not get the equipment, and that company was terminated because they could not perform.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Any other questions from the committee? 24. Colonel Hitchens.
I had a question. I read an article the other day about the automated traffic signals, and I couldn't come to grips with exactly how they worked. And I wondered if they worked completely automated or they required some human intervention. I can't imagine that, with the number of traffic lights we have across the state, that it would take some human intervention to make them work. And I didn't know we were at the point yet that the computers could operate them efficiently.
So a traffic signal, think about it as your home computer. You buy your home computer today, and 3 years from now, it's the oldest piece of junk out there, sort of obsolete. That's the way traffic signals are. The insides are basically computers. They do run automatically all the time. I mean, and there's things that need to be monitored. The sensors that pick up cars as they approach each leg wear out, break, don't function. It's just like, if you ever have problems with your computer at home, I mean, it's the same kind of thing. We have computers out in harsh environments in those stainless steel cabinets, so it takes interaction. And the biggest thing where this new technology helps is we're able to discern there is a problem, because in the past we had to rely on you guys or somebody calling and saying, I set this traffic signal a long time and it's red and it's not changing. Well, it's because that little sensor in the pavement's not functioning. So now we'll get notification, and that way we can actually make a change remotely instead of having to go out there, open the door, look in there, and figure out what's wrong. We can be more efficient, that when they go out, they know what's wrong and they can put the right part in. So that's the technology. So it's a little bit of a hybrid, but it's certainly come much further. And as technology continues to grow, we'll have cars and traffic signals talking to each other. In fact, we're going to do a pilot project on North Avenue in partnership with Georgia Tech and the City of Atlanta, so that cars with that technology, the signal talks to it and the car back and forth, and so it knows when it's going to turn yellow and red and vice versa.
Okay. I've got a quick question too. You just sort of opened up with talking about some of the changes that you're seeing coming down from the federal level. And I know a couple of years ago when we were looking at some of the funding challenges, we were told about how it costs more money, more dollars, and more time when you've got federal funds attached. Do you expect, are you hearing anything as far as maybe some of those restrictions, regulations, maybe getting relaxed a little bit? And another part of the question is, I mean, what are we hearing about long-term? I mean, the way we've looked at and modernized our method of funding transportation as a state, I know the federal formula is it hadn't been changed in many, many years, and obviously things have changed quite a bit. So a couple of questions there
Yeah,
on
we'll
the federal side.
start with the second one first. The 18.4 cents is the federal excise tax. It hadn't changed since 1994, and the current Transportation Funding Act, the FAST Act that we're working under now federally, takes a huge infusion of general funds or other funds to be supportive. So the Highway Trust Fund, the 18.4 cents, no longer keeps pace. So there's going to have to be federally, there's going to have to be an adjustment made. This last federal bill was sort of, I wouldn't say it was a gimmick, but they were able to find a way to make it whole. I don't know, I think the bag of tricks is probably over. So they're really going to have to address what they're doing federally, just as Georgia did here in 2015. So we'll see what happens. As far as regulations, and we're optimistic. I mean, we hear some of that out of the administration about regulations and all the things that could be improved. So we're optimistic that may happen. Well, I think it's time will see. We certainly have enjoyed much improved efficiency in using these state dollars now, where we're using them on capital projects. One great example is the State Route 20 corridor that runs from Canton over to Cumming up in Cherokee and Forsyth County, a project we just couldn't move because of the federal requirements, the federal regulations and sort of the bureaucracy, and we're having to zig and zag and go behind neighborhoods and near schools, and all everybody wanted to do was just widen the road. Now we've using state funds, Director of Planning put state funds on that, and we're just widening the road. We're obeying all the state laws and we're obeying all the federal laws, but you just don't have that federal environmental process that makes you go look for these other alternatives. So we're doing it in a very conservative, in compliance with all the federal laws and regulations as well as state laws, and getting the people what they want in a much expedited manner. So those are great examples, and I hope as we continue to go, we can benchmark some more of those examples of how we can get things done efficiently when you don't have those sort of burdensome regulations on top of you.
Okay, Commissioner, you've done a great job. Appreciate you taking the time to come back again today. I forgot to mention earlier, Jamie Harris is my assistant. Jamie, raise your hand. So for those who haven't met Jamie, make sure she may need an email and contact information so we can get things out. But we're available anytime. Abby Day is certainly no stranger to this transportation industry. Abby's with the Transportation Committee. She worked with Jay Roberts when he was chairman, and Chairman Coomer, and now Chairman Kevin Tanner. So let us know what we can do to support y'all. Thanks for the good work. Josh, everybody on the committee needs to know Josh. He's our point of contact with GDOT, and he's a familiar face around here. So look forward to working with you. And Commissioner, again, just thank you for your time.
Thank you all very much.
And next up, we're going to move on to the Aviation Authority with Amy Johnson. And we'll keep things going. We're running only about 5 minutes behind, so we can should be okay.
Thank you.
And you members of the committee should have a handout on the one pager on the Aviation Authority. Hey, Amy, how are you? So you want to go to the table here?
I'll take the table.
Okay. You doing all right this morning?
Good. How are you?
Good, good. Thank you for being with us. Look forward to hearing from you. Go ahead.
I've given you some information. In July 2012, the authority contracted out the fixed-wing passenger transportation flights. Since implementing the charter services, we've reduced the average yearly flights from 1,000 to 450. The average cost for the hourly rate has went from $2,600 to about $1,850 an hour. We're currently in our last year of the contract and in the process of working with state purchasing to bid it out again. For 17, we're projected to fly about 420 hours, and you'll see below its breakdown of our funds and how they'll be expensed. We're very simple.
That's not a bad thing.
No, it's not.
Well, thank you, Amy. Do we have any questions from the committee?
I did include our 18 just in case you realize
Okay.
the governor's recommendation has been to remove our state funds for 18. And that's because we've sold the current hangar that we're in and move into another smaller facility at the same airport. But we'll have those funds to operate.
Just as a little bit of history to the committee, I mean, can you just touch on, there was a lot of changes made to this just a
There
few
have
few
been,
few years ago that
yes.
sort of simplified things, if you will.
Yes, in 2012, it was the governor's recommendation to sell the state aircraft. We had 4 King Air aircraft that we operated the passenger transportation fixed wing within state and surrounding states. And we sold those aircraft. We did keep one for the Board of Regents to operate. So we continue to schedule that aircraft for the Board of Regents. And we also are the contact for the DNR Aviation Department to schedule their trips as well. But they decided to go with the charter services. It's cheaper to operate than maintaining the aircraft
Yeah.
yourself.
What about the Department of Public Safety?
They maintain their own.
Okay. All right.
Theirs is typically law enforcement,
Yeah.
so there's no pre-scheduling
Right,
usually for
right.
theirs.
Exactly. Any questions? Okay, Amy, thank you for being with us today.
All
Look
right,
forward to
thank
working with you.
Thank you.
Next, we've got up is the Director Tomlinson. Thank you for being here this morning with Gerda, and also Chris wears 2 hats. He's going to talk about the SERTA, State Road and Tollway Authority, as well.
On the screen here for you. Great, thank you. Well, good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the subcommittee. It's my pleasure to come to you today and tell you a little bit about the 2 agencies and authorities. As you mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, I do see some new faces, different than the House Transportation Committee. So I have some background information to, again, just give you context, and then I will go into the governor's recommendations. So State Road and Tollway Authority, Georgia Regional Transportation Authority, you'll hear us say SERTA and Greta. But if you look at that first slide, we're known, these are our commuter-facing operations. We're known as the people who bring you Express, the Express Transit Service. We run 25 routes. We have a fleet of 166 buses. Those routes run from park and ride lots located throughout Metro Atlanta. So we have 30 park and ride lots. They're located in 12 different counties. But we draw ridership from over 40 counties. People literally drive in from further outside the Metro Atlanta area into the park and ride lots to commute to one of the 3 employment zones that we serve. And those are downtown, midtown, and perimeter center. So we believe we play a key role in economic mobility, connecting people to jobs and job locations. In FY16, we had approximately 2 million passenger boardings. That works out to about 9,000 trips, or about 4,500 passengers per day. Turning to the tolling side, we are the folks behind the I-85 express lanes. We're working with our partners at the Department of Transportation on the MMIP plans, but all these plans to bring additional express lanes to the Metro Atlanta area, and I'm going to go into a little bit more detail about that. But a little bit of the tail of the tape. So as I stand here today, we have over 320,000 active Peach Pass accounts located primarily here in Georgia. There are some account holders that are even outside of our state borders. On those 320,000 accounts, there's over 500,000 active Peach Pass transponders on vehicles. So again, that's not how many we've issued over time. That's how many are still active and on the roads today. The I-85 express lanes, those 15.5 miles that run primarily in Gwinnett and part of DeKalb County, when that opened in 2011, on a monthly basis, we probably saw approximately 7,000 daily trips. Today, that facility is seeing over 28,000 weekday trips on average. That's on a daily basis. So even though over time there's always been some controversy and people have definite opinions when it comes to tolls and toll roads, in terms of demand and usage, the road is more popular than ever. One of the other things that we've done is the Peach Pass system is interoperable with the toll facilities in both Florida and North Carolina. And we continue to work on national interoperability as well as specifically East Coast interoperability. So you will continue to see us expanding the places where if your vehicle has a Peach Pass and you choose to drive, be it for business, recreation purposes, you can go through those toll facilities, not stop at a toll booth, and those toll activities will just be billed to your Peach Pass account. How did I end up as the executive director for two entities? This is something that Governor Deal asked me to consider doing after his reelection. And I hope you'll see as the presentation goes through, there's definitely a connection between providing these various choices really for our commuters. Over the past year, we've been focused internally on further integration of our functions. We've integrated and consolidated all of the staff. So you really have two authorities, but both have a primary objective of enhancing or improving mobility here in Georgia. Especially to the public, but quite frankly, even to members of the General Assembly. We've been putting less and less emphasis on the alphabet soup of agency names and letters and focusing on the brands of either Peach Pass or Express for the transit service or the Georgia Transportation Infrastructure Bank, which I'll speak about in a moment. Over the past year, we haven't just been focused internally looking at those items, but we've been making fundamental and significant changes to the services that we provide to the public. In September of last year, we undertook our most comprehensive changes and upgrades to the transit service. We consolidated down from 33 routes to 25 routes. But we did not reduce service. What we did is we consolidated some of the routes so we could increase the frequency. Where some of the routes used to bring one bus every 30 minutes to 45 minutes during our weekday rush hours, we've increased the frequency to 15 minutes. 18 out of our 30 park and rides have seen more trips. And we've started to upgrade the services available on the bus by putting free Wi-Fi, which is currently available on all of the express buses. And for the first time, we rolled out last year, Where's My Bus app, but basically using GPS technology. So even if the bus is stuck in traffic, at least people can see where their bus is and sort of time when they leave their house or their work. On the tolling side, we've been working closely and gearing up for the opening of the I-75 South Metro Express lanes. That is scheduled to open the last weekend of this month, so we're less than 2 weeks away. And this is going to bring Georgia's first reversible express lanes or toll lanes. So this is primarily in Henry County. Like I said, we'll open up the weekend of the 28th. And we're really excited because this is really going to help address the congestion and bottleneck that occurs in that area. So if you haven't gotten your Peach Pass yet and you travel in that area, please do. All right, so just want to give you, again, some context and background to what we do. The governor's recommended amended fiscal year 17 budget includes 3 items related to the two authorities. One, Commissioner McMurray spoke to, and that is, as it relates to the State Road and Tollway Authority, there is a recommendation for an additional $10 million in one-time funds for the Georgia Transportation Infrastructure Bank. As it relates to Greta, there's 2 requests. One is $2 million in state funds to be used as matching funds to rehabilitate 32 of our express coaches. I'll go into the details on that in a moment, which it really has to do a lot with the age of the buses. And then approximately $8 million to look at expanding the express fleet because we plan to add additional service in conjunction with the opening of the Northwest Corridor express lanes in the Cobb and Cherokee area. So let me break both of those down. So going back to CERTA. CERTA has approximately a $28.7 million operating budget. Most of that money comes through either our contractual services and obviously the revenue is generated in tolls. In terms of appropriated dollars, the appropriations lines up with what Commissioner McMurray called the GDOT payments to CERTA. It is a budget line item, standing budget line item in GDOT's budget. And you'll see on the bottom right of the slide, it's primarily composed of two components. We receive just under $13 million a year for the infrastructure bank program. And then we receive for FY17 just under $240 million to be used for the bond management program. The bond management, those are the Garvey bonds and the guaranteed revenue bonds that Commissioner McMurray spoke of. But basically, we issue debt on behalf of the state, the proceeds of which are used by the department for the transportation program. And so we are then responsible, since those bonds are issued in our name, for the debt service. The money that comes in our budget is appropriations of either state motor fuel funds or the federal money that's going to come down to pay those bonds. Putting the debt service to the side, GTIP is the only other area where there's a pass-through appropriation. If you're not familiar with the GTIP program, this is a revolving loan and grant program. The General Assembly passed a law in 2009. 2010 was the first year that the program was operational. And as I stand here today, over 4 subsequent rounds of GTIP funding awards, we have given out awards to 63 projects, a total of $82 million, which has enabled projects with a combined value of $375 million to go forward. What you see on the screen are the results of the latest or the last round, which was round 4, where a total of $27 million in GTIP grants and awards were made. There was 17 grants and 3 loans. As you can imagine, grants seem to be much more popular than loans, but we're working closely with the ACCG, GMA, and others to further promote the loan side of the program. The governor's request in amended 17 is recommending that $10 million be appropriated to go into the GTIP program. If that was to occur, what you see on the screen is we would have a total pool of funds, if you will, of approximately $25 million available to award. Without the appropriation, we'd have about $15 million. The $25 million amount is similar to the amount of money that was awarded in the last round. Without that, at about $15 million, what we end up with is we can still move forward. Let me be crystal clear about that. But we end up with the potential of a hyper-competitive round. $14 million against the number of requests that we receive. It would be hard to really choose projects and let deal with the awards based on the value that the projects may bring to the communities. By the way, as of today, we are opening up the 5th round. And so we're about to start taking project requests. That round will be open for the next 60 days or so. And so local governments, community improvement districts, and others can submit their request for this funding for this popular program. And because it's done on a competitive basis, what we've seen over time is people come with skin in the game. For each GTIP dollar that's awarded, there's generally anywhere from $3 to $5 already available for that project. So GTIP normally serves the function of that last mile of funding to move these critical projects forward. And the amount of match that's already available and funding that's already committed to the project is a factor that we look at in the scoring and awards given out under this program. Turning to the other two requests in the governor's recommended budget. Both of those are related to the express services I mentioned. So the Greta budget is approximately $30.7 million. As you can see, the overwhelming amount of that, 84% of that, is in contract costs. We have an outsourced contract for the operations of the express service. That contract alone is approximately $15 million a year. When you add in fuel, which is a pass-through charge, it floats in the area of around $19 million. So that clearly is the bulk of our contract expense. In terms of appropriated dollars, $12.9 million is appropriated in state general funds to Greta. $9.7 million of that goes directly into the Express program, and approximately $3 million goes into our administration costs. Turning specifically to the $2 million that's requested for match of federal funds. As I mentioned, we have a fleet of 166 buses. The Express service started back in 2004. We have not bought a new Express coach since 2011. The original buses that started the service in 2004 are still on the road today, and they are reaching the end of their useful life. We're fortunate that because we're in the South, the overall frame and chassis of the buses are in good shape. They haven't been eaten up by salt and corrosion and those type of things. So we have put together a comprehensive program to rehab or overhaul the fleet. And these funds, coupled with FTA, Federal Transit Administration dollars, is going to allow us to start and continue on with this rehab program. So a couple of facts and figures for you. A new Express coach runs anywhere between $680,000 to about $750,000 a piece. A lot of times when I've asked people how much they think one of those buses costs, I've heard of $100,000, $200,000. Numbers that you tend to think of when you think of school buses. But these numbers are closer to the cost of what it costs for, say, a fire engine. So they're expensive buses. Rehabbing one of these buses, which is, if you've ever seen that TV show, Overhauling, we're talking about new engines, new hoses, new transmissions, new axles. We can do all of that, and that'll run anywhere from about $240,000 to $290,000. That cost range is factoring in all of those major systems, plus some of the upgrades that I mentioned, like upgrading the electrical, the Wi-Fi, putting cameras on the buses for safety, upgrading the lighting to LEDs that are more efficient. So this program allows us for a smaller upfront capital investment to rehab the fleet and look at extending the useful life another 4.5 to 6 years per bus that's rehabbed. The last request, again, was $8 million for expansion of the fleet. What you see on the map is a map view of the Northwest Corridor Express lanes. Again, this is the 30-mile-long reversible express lane project planned in Cobb and Cherokee counties. That one is scheduled to open in spring of 2018. What we're doing is we're working closely with GDOT, but we're also looking at it from both the toll perspective and the transit perspective on where we can strategically expand the service by adding new park and ride lots or expanding existing lots to encourage people to use transit and therefore be able to use the advantages of these express lanes without incurring the cost of driving, as well as contributing to congestion by driving your own vehicle. So again, it's about choice. People will be able to choose to ride, but working with GDOT and the State Transportation Board, we've set a policy that all public transit will be able to use the new facilities for free. So whatever we can do to expand the availability of park and rides closely located to this facility is what we're doing. And when we do that, in order to draw down federal grant monies, we have to look at a corresponding expansion in service, which actually, of course, is what we want to do. When this facility is available, we want to be able to give people another choice for their commute. That really combines, and if you look at this map, what you see is a map of Metro Atlanta. All the blue P's are the existing 30 park and rides. And when you look at the top upper hemisphere of 285 and Georgia 400, you're just seeing the projects, the express lane projects that are planned as part of the major mobility investment program that we're working on with GDOT. The plan is over the next 10 years to enter into contract to add new lanes, not convert lanes, but add additional lanes from one side of 285 at 20 all the way across the top of the perimeter. Specifically, the plan as it currently is formulated would add one lane in each direction from I-20 on the west side up to I-75. It would add 2 additional lanes in each direction from I-75 past Georgia 400 over to Spaghetti Junction or I-85. So 2 additional lanes in each direction there. And then from I-85 down to I-20 on the east side, 1 additional lane in each direction. The last project or component is to add 2 additional lanes. So again, 2 new lanes in each direction on Georgia 400 from 285 up to essentially the Forsyth County line. And our goal is to look at where, again, it makes sense to increase the transit service that we provide to take full advantage and utilization of the reliable and faster trip times. That really covers everything, but because this committee is focused on appropriations, I wanted to include a slide on the Go Transit program. If you recall, 2 sessions ago, the General Assembly appropriated $75 million in general obligation bonds to be used for transit statewide. And that money was appropriated to the State Road and Tollway Authority to essentially put together and administer an award program similar to the GTIP program. And with that $75 million, we were able to award 11 projects to 9 recipients, various locations throughout the state. You certainly see Metro Atlanta was represented going as far north as Athens, Clark County, but Albany and Savannah, Chatham County specifically, also received awards. And so we're very excited to see, as those projects get up and running, how those funds are put to use. Those bonds were 10-year bonds, so one of the requirements of an eligible project was that it had to have a useful life of 10 years or more. With some of the smaller transit, again, Commissioner McMurray mentioned there's about 120 transit operators. A lot of those are for medical-related transport. Those smaller buses and vans typically have a useful life of about 5 years, so they were not able to use these funds for that purpose. But the larger coaches, capital expansion of a multimodal transit center in Albany, Gwinnett and Henry County are looking at additional park and rides. Those were projects that were eligible for use. And the last thing I'd mention, we saw a lot of innovation and thought in some of the projects in both the University of Georgia, Chatham Area Transit in Savannah are looking at rolling out and adding to their fleet their first all-electric buses. And Athens, Clark County is doing diesel-electric hybrids into their fleet. Again, utilizing this capital funds to do something that will have cleaner emissions, but equally as important, if not, equally as important, lower their operation and maintenance costs because they're electric and they won't have to buy as much fuel. I know I covered a lot of things, but I'm happy to take any questions, Mr. Chairman.
Well, you do have a few questions. I'm going to start with Representative Beverly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a quick question for you. These GTIP funds, what kind of projects are qualify for these this fund?
So these have all been transportation projects, but they come in all shapes and forms. If you're familiar with the diverging diamond interchanges, this is a perimeter mall where the traffic crosses over direction to make it easier for people to get on the highway. Every single diverging diamond interchange in the state, there's the one at Perimeter and there's two in Gwinnett, have received awards. We did various roundabouts. We've done a triple left turn. I believe that was on Mansell Road because traffic was starting to back up onto 400. But the key here is transportation projects that are going to make a positive impact, economic impact for the local community. This is different than the LMIG process. We look at the economic impact and the benefit for the local community, and it's not so much on a global scale. And the last thing I would mention is we've seen some very interesting partnerships between, say, a local county DOT and community improvement districts. And again, if you're not familiar with those, these are self-taxing districts where the businesses add on to their property tax millage rate for these projects. So they've partnered to, again, move projects forward.
Just a quick follow-up, Mr. Chairman.
Sure.
Are authorities eligible to apply for these as well, like the Industrial Authority, or Housing Authority?
Yes, if you look at the Infrastructure Bank statute, it essentially says all public entities are eligible, and then it specifically calls out community improvement districts, who some people consider quasi public.
Representative Rakestraw.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So my understanding is a new bus costs anywhere from $600,000 to $800,000. Is that correct?
$680,000 to $750,000, $800,000.
And then when I'm looking at the numbers, $8 million to rehab 32 buses. That's about $250,000 a bus, and it gets us 4 more years on a bus. So wouldn't it make more sense to do a rotating replacement schedule? If you get 12 years out of a bus, then, you know, for 600 to say 750 at the high end, you're going to get a lot more mileage, and you can sell those used buses for surplus and get money back. So why aren't we doing a rotating replacement schedule versus a rehab plan?
Thank you for that question. We would love to get onto a regular schedule where there was a rotating replacement. And again, take your pick, 20% a year, 25% a year, et cetera. But you're essentially correct. The amount of money between replacing them versus rehabbing them actually can turn out to be roughly the same. It's a question of how much upfront capital there is available. And because the state previously was not already on this rotating schedule, where we stand today is we have a significant amount of the fleet that's coming up on its useful life. So the amount of upfront capital dollars that we would need to just go straight replacement is significantly higher. So this basically
But it's a pretty significant net savings long term, because rehabbing only gets you 4 more years, but making the investment gets you 12 years, and you get the money you make from selling those buses surplus. So, I mean, it just makes sense to.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you. Again, the challenge that we've seen when this has been brought up in the past is going from that concept to actually having the dollars appropriated has been a concern. And
Well, it's a new day in Georgia.
And I'm happy to look at it. And the one thing so that's why I said thank you for the question. We would love to be there, no doubt about it. One other thing to factor in is whether it's rehab or replacements, between the procurement and then the lead time for buses to be manufactured, you have to allow 12 to 18 months. So even if, as you said, it's a new day and we wanted to revisit the approach, from a safety perspective, we probably need to at least rehab some of the buses, because we are seeing a higher number of mechanical breakdowns and failures. But the contract that we put in place can be sized and changed, and we're not committed. We have not made a long-term commitment that we couldn't move away from.
Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Carson?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank you for your presentation. I know we've talked about this in the Transit Study Committee, Greta, and the great work you guys are doing. I wanted to ask about the multimodal transfer station in Albany. Could you go over that a little bit more?
Yes. So Albany is looking at creating a multimodal transit station. This is a station where people could actually park their vehicles and get on some of the local transit services. But it's also a station where within the region, various operators could allow people to transfer from one county system to another. I believe they already have a facility that they're trying to expand or upgrade, so people can get out of the elements while they're waiting for these buses.
So this is all buses being
yes, it's all
facilitated.
Bus.
Okay, so we're not fixed rail, not heavy rail. Okay.
Yeah, this is all bus and park and ride facilities.
Okay, thank you.
Representative Dickerson?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wanted to know how long is Round 5 going to be open for these funds for the GTIB?
Approximately 60 days, and so it opens up today, and it stays open for about 2 months.
Okay, thank you.
You know, it'd be good, we could get some information on that we could send out to some of our constituents and
Absolutely.
local governments.
We actually have a press release that'll be going out today, and I believe we worked with ACCG and GMA to send an email blast out last week.
Yeah,
and typically, since this is the 5th round, there are a lot of people who are always have projects waiting. We have not awarded because there's never been enough money to award every single project, so we sometimes see resubmissions.
Sure. Representative Strickland?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director, I'm from Henry County, covered the area that has the new express lanes opening up later this month. The biggest criticism out here locally is anticipated cost of using these lanes. And with the expansion of the express bus service that we're seeing here, I know we have a new station and parking ride coming open, I think, on Jonesboro Road on 75 as well with that new grant. Are we going to be able to keep the cost of using these buses the same? With the increase in demand, are we going to raise the cost of riding on the buses?
So a couple of pieces to that. We are looking at all the time at whether we can maintain our fares. So on the transit service, we have a zone-based fare system of $3 for essentially those zones that are closer to the city, and $4 for our further out areas. In the Henry County area, those are around $3. I think the McDonough route might be at $4. So to your question, we're looking at the fares. We have not done a fare increase in several years, and right now with gas prices going down, we've seen some impact on ridership, yet our costs aren't going down. So what I'm hoping to do as we look at fares is continue to provide discounts, especially on the multi-ride passes, a 10-ride pass and a monthly pass. But there is the potential of looking at a fare increase for the single fare ride. But again, that gets back to the cost of the lanes. So 2 things. One of the questions I typically get is, what will the tolls be? Right now, we're projecting that after ramp up, when we start seeing a routine amount of traffic during rush hour, we are forecasting, like the weather, but we're forecasting approximately 35 cents a mile. So to go a full-length trip, which is a little over 11.5 miles, you're looking at about a $4 trip. I don't think we'll see that right away because right now in each direction you have 3 lanes. This reversible road is adding 2 additional lanes. That's about 66% capacity. That's a lot of extra road. So we think it'll be lower. The minimum trip charge will be 50 cents. You might see that in the overnights, and I anticipate when we first open during rush hour, you'll probably see around 10 cents, 15 cents a mile. Either way, what we're hoping people will see is if the express service, and we do have a Route 430 that will use the facility, if that's a viable option that can get them there as quick as if they were driving, that they'll at least try the transit option to see if it works for them.
And that was one follow-up, Mr. Chairman.
Sure.
And that's one of the things, I think one of the biggest perks of these new lanes is right now with bus service prices like they are, you have the ability to ride the express bus, use the lanes, and get that guaranteed trip time in the town if you can then connect to your final destination where you arrive with MARTA, wherever you're going from there. But if we are going to see the prices of the bus fares go up, but you're not going to see that demand, I wouldn't think, increase for the bus services if you can pay the same price to take the lanes with your car.
Absolutely. This is something that we've looked at even when we opened I-85, and we know that when you factor in the cost of maintenance and insurance on the vehicle, it's still much cheaper. But that's not necessarily intuitive. People are going to say, what was the toll? What was the fare? And we certainly keep that in mind as we look at, quite frankly, fare policy on the transit side as well as toll rate policy.
Thank you.
All right, I've got just a follow-up question while we're talking about these buses. I mean, I know y'all have done a lot of, probably had some sleepless nights thinking about what to do with these buses, and you've done a major study. And but as a committee, it's a lot of money to rehab something that's, that old. So we'll be sharing some more information. But I guess what would really would be helpful just to know, like, at what timeline, when are you thinking on turning some of these in and starting the rehab process? So
we've started the rehab process on the oldest buses, the 2004s. And again, when I say it's not only it's safety, it's convenience. We've had buses break down. We've had air conditioning go out. The seats were worn out. So we've already started, and they will probably start trickling in at around 3 or 4 buses every couple of months. But we have a fleet of 166 buses. We do not, and that's why this request here, we do not have funding to continue on. But the oldest buses, it really seemed to make sense. But I want to be crystal clear to the committee. We set up the contract to give us maximum flexibility if there was ever additional funding. But we needed to have a mechanism in place. So we are more than prepared to work with this committee to change direction. And essentially what I'm saying is, just to make the math simple, if funding was appropriated for all the buses that were nearing their useful life, so we're talking, $50, $60, $70 million. What I'm saying is the oldest buses, it'll be at least 12 months before we could even begin to see a new bus. I still need to do some of this overhaul so that I have enough fleet to run the service that we have. Mm-hmm. But we could very quickly change gears, because to your point, we have the information to look at buying versus rehabbing, and the ideal situation for us would be to have new buses and be on a regular purchasing schedule, so as they reach their useful life, they cycle out. And the representative made a good point. It is possible to surplus and sell those buses. We have to wait till we're at least the 12-year mark. Otherwise, we have to look at repaying the federal interest that's gone into those buses. And a bus that's 12 years old that has not been rehabbed is going to have some limited value. or put another way, it's not so much about the past, but there wasn't like a major tune-up that was done on some of these buses. So they are really getting old. But again, love to work with this committee, would love to have new buses, 12 years useful life with a brand new bus. They'll be the cleanest, most fuel efficient, et cetera. And even when you rehab a bus, there are some things that aren't being replaced that are old. So would love to get on a regular program.
Well, thank you for all the information. One final question, just going back to you touched on when the two agencies were integrated, Gerda and CERTA. I mean, as far as like, I mean, how was that successful? As far as did it save money and you know, and what were those funds that were saved used for?
So in consolidating them, we yes, it's been successful, and we're still in the middle of it.
Mm-hmm.
There were a number of positions that we were able to eliminate because of redundancy, and those savings have gone. Those savings were realized on the Greta side and was put back into the operations, and it's why there has not been a request to increase the amount of state appropriated funds. And I would say you're looking at savings of about a little over $1.3 million in realized savings by getting rid of some of these redundancies. But there were also some improvements that came with it. Because of these express lanes, on the CERTA side, we're planning on expanding our customer service center, the number of reps. We're going to more roads, more calls. Instead of going out and hiring new positions, we integrated the Greta customer service reps, so thereby not having to hire somebody else, thereby not having to pay out additional money. And we cross-trained them in both businesses, increasing our sort of redundancy across the board. And so as we sit here today, we have a fully integrated customer service center, and we're receiving calls from other agencies around the country asking, how's that working? And we saw the benefits of that during the winter weather last week, where now on the Greta side before, we didn't have the capability to fully work remotely. We had that technology on the CERTA side, and when this weather was coming in, they could take their laptops, their phones are soft phones built into it, and as long as they had a high-speed internet connection, they could service those calls literally from anywhere. So these are some of the things that we've been able to achieve, and we're hoping there'll be more synergies. Over the next year, we're hoping to achieve savings by, it may seem little, but you know, both agencies had their own copier lease contracts. We had 2 sets of cell phone contracts. And what we're finding is even if we had some of the same providers, one contract or the other might have had more favorable terms. So we'll still see the monthly cost, but there'll be some incremental savings by that consolidation.
Well, thank you, Director Tomlinson. Good job, and we look forward to working with you. This new committee. This is an outstanding committee. I don't think you could handpick a better group that represents all of Georgia. And look forward to working with you and your deputy director there, Mr. Stansel, that I've got a lot of respect for. He's working with him on economic development. So look forward to working with y'all, and thank you again.
Well, thank you. And to that point, I should have pointed out, Elmer Stansel is our deputy executive director. Many of you know him, but myself or he are available for whatever you need. And also have Mark Peoples, our CFO, who is aging rapidly because it is 2 very different types of budgets to work on. So, but I appreciate everything that they're doing.
Well, that's perfect. We've got just enough time to get to our next meeting. Thank you very much, and thank you all.